My daughter moved back in. I told myself it was a blessing. I had spent 3 years rattling around this house alone after my wife passed. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a kitchen that still smelled like her on certain mornings when the heat came on. My daughter said she wanted to be closer, said she was worried about me, said a man my age shouldn't be living by himself out in the suburbs with no one to check on him. I believed her. I want to be honest with you from the start, because that's the only way this story makes any sense. I believed every word she said, and I am not a naive man. I spent 31 years as a claims investigator for an insurance company in Cincinnati. I have looked people in the eye while they lied to me about car accidents, about fires, about slip and falls that never happen. I have a good radar for dishonesty. But she was my daughter. Before I tell you what I eventually found out, I want you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me, where are you watching this from and what time is it where you are right now? I read every single one. Now let me take you back to last February. My name is not important. You can call me by what my grandkids call me, Pop. I am 67 years old. I live in a 2-story colonial outside of Dayton, Ohio. My wife, Barbara, died of a stroke 3 years ago, and the grief of that is something I won't dramatize here, because anyone who has lost a spouse already knows what it feels like, and there are no words that do it justice anyway. My daughter, I'll call her by her name, which is Wendy, is 41. She lives, or used to live, about 90 minutes away in Columbus with her husband Kevin and their 2 kids. My grandchildren, 8 and 11 years old, good kids. I adore them. When Wendy called me in January and said she and Kevin were having some problems and she needed a little time away, I didn't ask too many questions. I told her she was always welcome here. I told her the guest room still had her old quilt on the bed. She cried a little on the phone, which broke my heart, and she said, "Dad, I just need somewhere safe." I said, "This is your home. You come whenever you're ready." She arrived on a Thursday with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of things she said she couldn't leave behind. She hugged me in the driveway for a long time. I could feel her shoulders shaking. The first few weeks were genuinely nice. She cooked dinner some nights. We watched old movies on the couch like we used to when she was in high school. She helped me sort through some of Barbara's things in the upstairs closet, which was something I'd been putting off for 2 years. I remember thinking, this was God working something good out of something painful. My daughter needed a refuge, and I needed company. It felt right. Then, around the 3rd week, small things started to shift. It started with the mail. I have always sorted my own mail at the kitchen table every morning with my coffee. It's a habit, nothing special about it, just routine. One morning I came downstairs, and the mail from the previous day, which I hadn't gotten to yet, had already been opened. Not all of it, but the envelope from my bank, the one that comes monthly with my account summary, had been slit neatly along the top and resealed with a strip of tape. I asked Wendy about it. She looked at it, then looked at me and said, "Dad, I didn't touch your mail." "Are you sure you didn't open it yourself and forget?" I stood there for a moment. I hadn't opened it. I was certain of that, but the way she said it, gently, with this little worried tilt of her head, made me feel, just for a second, like maybe I had forgotten. I was 67. I'd had some memory slip-ups since Barbara died. Nothing serious, but enough that I was already sensitive about it. I let it go. 2 weeks after that, I went to pay my property tax online, something I do every quarter, and I noticed my login credentials weren't working. I called the bank. They told me the password had been changed from a device I didn't recognize. They reset it for me, and I hung up feeling unsettled. I told myself it was probably a glitch, a security update, something technical I didn't understand. But I changed the password and wrote it down in a notebook I kept in my nightstand drawer, and I started paying closer attention. Wendy had always been affectionate with me, checking in, asking how I slept, bringing me coffee, but somewhere around week 5 I started to notice that the affection had a kind of schedule to it. It came at particular moments, right before she asked to see something on my phone, right after she mentioned that Kevin's lawyer was being difficult, right when she brought up for the second time that she thought it would make more sense for her to be listed as a co-owner on my checking account, just for emergencies, she said, just so she could help if anything happened to me. I told her I'd think about it. She dropped it that night, but brought it up again 3 days later. The second time, she had a printed document with her. She set it on the table next to my dinner plate and said she'd had a friend look it over, that it was a simple power of attorney form, nothing dramatic, just something responsible people put in place as they got older. She was smiling when she said it, but her eyes were watching me the way I used to watch claimants when I was waiting for a tell. I looked at the form. I looked at her. "Let me have my attorney look at it first," I said. Her smile stayed on her face, but something behind it closed. She said, "Of course, Dad, no rush." That night, I did not sleep well. I lay in the dark and tried to put the pieces together without letting myself arrive at the conclusion I was already arriving at. She was my daughter. She had cried in my driveway. She had sat with me while I packed up Barbara's sweaters into a donation bag. People who love you are capable of being frightened and selfish at the same time. Maybe that's all this was. Maybe Kevin's legal situation was worse than she'd told me, and she was scared, and she was trying to protect herself by involving me in a way that wasn't appropriate but wasn't malicious either. I wanted that to be true, but the next morning, I got in my car and drove to a store and bought 2 small indoor security cameras, the kind you can monitor from your phone. I told myself I was being paranoid. I set them up anyway. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, angled to catch the desk where I keep my files, and the counter where I leave my mail. I made sure they were small. I made sure Wendy wouldn't notice them. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 4 days after I installed the cameras, I woke up around 2 in the morning and couldn't fall back asleep. I lay there for about an hour, then picked up my phone to check the camera feeds out of habit more than suspicion. The kitchen was dark. The living room was not. There was a lamp on in the corner, a small one by the desk. Wendy was sitting in my desk chair with her back partially toward the camera. She was wearing her robe. She had my filing cabinet drawer open, the middle one where I keep financial documents, and she was going through it slowly, methodically, the way someone does when they've done it before and know they have time. I watched for 6 minutes. I didn't move. She pulled out a folder. I could not see what was in it from the angle, but I watched her photograph several pages with her phone. Then she put the folder back, closed the drawer carefully, turned off the lamp, and walked back upstairs. I sat in my bed in the dark for a long time after that. I did not go downstairs. I did not confront her. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to walk down that hallway and knock on her door and demand an explanation. But 31 years of claims investigation had taught me one thing above everything else. Never let someone know what you know before you're ready. Evidence first, confrontation second. In the morning, she made pancakes. She hummed while she cooked. She asked me if I'd slept okay. She poured my coffee. I sat at that kitchen table and I watched my daughter make me breakfast, and I thought about every single morning she had done this since she arrived, and I tried to figure out how long this had been the plan. That same day I called my attorney. His name is a private matter, but he has handled my affairs for 15 years and I trust him completely. I told him about the power of attorney form. He told me not to sign anything. I told him I had no intention of doing so, and then I told him about the cameras and what I had seen. There was a pause on his line. He said, "I want you to save that footage, all of it. Don't delete anything. Don't mention any of this to her." I said I understood. He said, "I also want you to call your bank today and put a flag on your account. Tell them to require 2-form verification for any changes, and check your credit report." I checked my credit report that afternoon. There were 2 hard inquiries I did not recognize, both from the past 6 weeks, both from lenders I had never heard of. Someone had been applying for credit in my name. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Walgreens and read that report 3 times. My hands were very steady. I have always had steady hands. But something inside my chest felt like it was being folded in half, slowly. Over the next 2 weeks, I built the case quietly. My attorney helped me obtain records. The inquiries came back tied to a loan application, a home equity line of credit on my house. The application had been filed using my social security number and a scanned copy of my signature. The signature was close. Not perfect, but close enough that it had passed an initial review. The loan had not yet been approved. I had been flagged for a verification call that I never received because the phone number listed on the application was not mine. It was a number I did not recognize. I called that number from a blocked line. Wendy answered. She used a different name, but I knew her voice. I have known her voice since she was 40 minutes old. I hung up without saying anything. I went home and sat in the backyard in one of the old lawn chairs Barbara and I used to drag out on summer evenings. The oak tree in the corner of the yard had just started coming back, little buds on the branches, the kind of early spring green that always made Barbara point and say something about hope. I looked at that tree for a long time. Then I went inside and called my attorney and told him what I had found. "It's fraud," he said. I said, "I know." He asked me how I wanted to handle it. I told him I wanted to do it right. Not fast. Right. We spent the next week coordinating. My attorney contacted law enforcement. A detective from the Financial Crimes Unit came to my house while Wendy was out running errands, and I walked him through everything: the camera footage, the credit report, the loan application, the recordings. He was thorough. He took copies of everything. He told me they would need a few more days. Those were the longest few days of my life. I continued to act normally. I ate dinner across the table from my daughter every night. I listened to her tell me about her day. Once she reached across the table and petted my hand and said, "I'm really glad I came here, Dad. I feel safe with you." I said, "I'm glad you're here too." I do not know how I said it without my voice changing. On a Thursday morning, 12 days after my conversation with the detective, I came downstairs and found Wendy sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a notepad covered in handwriting beside it. She was deep in concentration and didn't hear me come in. I saw on her screen what looked like a spreadsheet with account numbers and columns of figures. I poured myself coffee. I sat down. She closed the laptop. She said, "Morning, Dad. You're up early." I said, "I've got some things to take care of today." She nodded, flipped her notepad face down. 40 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. I opened it. The detective was there with 2 other officers. He looked at me with a kind of quiet respect that I appreciated. He said, "Good morning, sir. Is your daughter home?" I said. "She's in the kitchen." I stepped aside and let them in. I did not watch what happened next. I walked to the back door, opened it, and stood on the porch. The oak tree was still there, still green. A cardinal was sitting in the upper branches, a male, red as a fire truck against the gray morning sky. I watched it for a while. I could hear her voice inside, first confused and frightened, then something else. A sound I don't have the right word for. It was the sound of a mask coming off. Not my daughter's voice anymore. Something defensive and hard and ugly. I stood on that porch until the sound stopped. The detective came out a few minutes later. He told me they were taking her in for questioning, that 4 more charges would likely follow within 24 hours. That I had done everything right. I thanked him. He said, "This couldn't have been easy." I said, "No, it was not." He left. I went back inside. The kitchen was quiet. Her notepad was still on the table, face down where she'd left it. I didn't touch it. I put my coffee cup in the sink, rinsed it out, set it in the drying rack the way I always do. Barbara taught me that. She said a clean sink makes the morning feel manageable. She was right about most things. I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who recognizes something in this story. Maybe it's not a daughter. Maybe it's a son, a sibling, a nephew, someone you welcomed into your home because you love them and you believed in them. I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to me is not rare. Financial exploitation of older adults by family members is one of the most underreported forms of abuse in this country. The National Council on Aging estimates that billions of dollars are taken from seniors every year, and the majority of perpetrators are people the victim trusted completely. If something feels wrong, if documents are appearing that you didn't ask for, if your accounts are behaving strangely, if someone is making you feel confused about your own memory, please do not dismiss it. Please talk to someone. Call your bank, call your attorney. Call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1162. They can connect you with resources in your area. Wendy was formally charged 6 weeks later. 2 counts of attempted fraud, 1 count of identity theft. Her attorney negotiated a plea. I was not asked to testify, but I submitted a written statement. In it, I said what I still believe, that what she did was not only a crime against me, but a betrayal of her mother's memory. Barbara worked her whole life for what we built together. It was not Wendy's to take. Kevin and I have spoken twice since the arrest. He did not know the full extent of what she had been planning, and I believe him, though I am watching. My grandchildren do not fully understand what has happened, and I pray they don't for a long time. I still live in this house. I still have coffee at the kitchen table every morning. The oak tree is full now, thick with summer leaves, and the cardinal comes back most mornings. I have started having dinner on Fridays with a neighbor who lost her husband last fall, and that has been good for both of us. I am not bitter. I want to be clear about that. What I am is clear-eyed in a way I maybe wasn't before. I know now that love is not the same as trust, and that trust has to be earned even from the people you made a home for. The house is quieter than it was when Wendy was here, but it is honest. And for the first time in a long time, when I wake up in the morning, I know exactly what is mine. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a spiritual way, not in the way people mean when they say everything happens for a reason. I don't lean on that kind of comfort. I mean it in a practical, human sense. Every choice has a weight to it, and, eventually, that weight lands somewhere. Wendy made choices, small ones first, opening an envelope, burning a password, watching to see if I noticed, and when I didn't push back, she made a larger choice, and then a larger one after that. That is how this kind of thing works. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in increments, each one small enough to feel survivable, until you look up and realize how far from shore you've drifted. I think about the version of this story where I signed that power of attorney form, where I told myself the bank confusion was just my memory getting worse, where I felt grateful to have my daughter in the house and didn't want to disturb that by asking hard questions. That version of me loses everything Barbara and I spent 30 years building, and the worst part is he never sees it coming. What protected me wasn't luck, it was the decision, uncomfortable, even painful, to trust what I was observing over what I wanted to believe. That is harder than it sounds. When the person you're watching is someone you love, every instinct tells you to find a different explanation. The mind is very creative when it comes to protecting the heart. I know that now in a way I didn't before. There's something I want to say about intelligence, because I think we misunderstand it. People talk about being smart like it's a fixed thing you either have or you don't. But the kind of intelligence that actually protects you in life is the kind you practice. It's the habit of noticing, of asking a second question when the first answer feels too easy, of not letting affection overrule observation. I was an investigator for 3 decades, and even I had to fight against myself to apply those skills to my own daughter. That fight was worth having. And then there is the matter of what you do when you know. Because knowing is only half of it. The other half is having the steadiness to act slowly, carefully, without letting anger or grief rush you into a mistake. Those 2 weeks of sitting across the dinner table from Wendy, watching her pour my coffee and ask how I slept, that was the hardest thing I have ever done. But it was right. It was necessary. And it meant that when the morning came, everything was in order. I am not angry at my daughter in the way people might expect. What I feel is closer to grief, for who she used to be, or maybe for who I believed she was. But I do not carry bitterness, and I'll tell you why. Because the moment I let this make me smaller, more fearful, more closed off, less willing to trust anyone, she wins something she hasn't earned. I refuse to give her that. Barbara used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching. She meant it as a warning to be good in private, but I've come to think it works the other way too. Character is also what you do when someone you love isn't being good, when the watching falls to you, and the truth is something you have to go find yourself, and you have to decide whether you're brave enough to look at it straight on. I looked. I'm still here, and I know exactly what is mine.